So we are so excited to talk to you about the AI-assisted API management today. And in this session, we will be sharing API-assisted automation to run your API program that will make your life really easy as a platform admin or as a developer. So my name is Sujin Park. I'm a product manager at Google. And joining me is my colleague, a principal engineer, Todd Segal, at also Google Cloud as well. So we have a jam-packed schedule, as you can see. The role of APIs in the current landscape. What are the trends? What are the new challenges? And what are the guiding principles that are getting more relevant now with the introduction of AI? And how Apigee and Gemini can help APIs, creating API and solving API challenges today. And then we will dive into 5 incredible demos that we prepared for you to automate API operations by all the features that we've been working on. And they will be released as a public preview very soon. And finally, we will share how you can learn more and get involved and get your feedback. And we need all of you. So now, why API is so critical component? And if you were to categorize the type of systems, I mean, there's a plethora of systems out there. There's a system of record, and this is where the data is generated, and this is where the source of truth is coming from. Your application, your services are located here. And there's a system of engagement where data is consumed through applications, the services, all the architecture that you have, many devices, many different ways, and many different use cases. And API has been the kind of a glue and catalyst and bridge between these two systems as a provider and consumer, supply chain, any kind of use cases across all industries. Then there are systems of intelligence and where you can really make sense out of those data that you generated and been consuming. And these are the generative AI, API, and AI assistant, business intelligence, enabled by machine language and natural language model that we have today. So API are the connective tissue of all these systems. And especially now, they are becoming more valuable as they are a critical component to accessing the systems of intelligence that generates tremendous efficiency and value. So from e-commerce to mobile app to cloud computing, API has been the building block for the digital transformation for the last decade and probably 2 decades or so. And according to the research, average organization manages about 200 APIs today. We see that time to delivery will be accelerated because AI can generate code than I can, for sure, and it's faster than current pace of application development cycle. So today, we are seeing the beginning of AI-driven development, AI-driven orchestration, AI-driven decision-making. All those things are going on, as you can see from this conference. And there's no doubt that API will drive API growth and consumption from years to come. Now, so what would you do when your API grows 10 times of that, and 100 times, and within a very short period of time? And how can you manage, let's say, 100,000 APIs in your organizations? And that's a real challenge that we have. And that will be the reality very soon. Now, growth of API comes with many challenges. So one of the biggest challenges that we see is the growing of APIs is really discovering the APIs and discovering the APIs that you need, avoiding any duplications that you have in your organization. And Gartner predicts that even early as next year, 2025, 50% of enterprise API will be unmanaged. So if it's not managed, it's hard to discover. And if it's hard to discover, it's really manage that. It's hard to manage that. And another challenge is APIs are increasingly becoming the new battleground for application security. Because security posture are not programmed or configured by default. So as a result, 50% of organizations that we survey faced on API security incident this past year, and it's growing. And also, when so much business value is passing through your APIs, maintaining the reliability of APIs is really critical, especially on the days like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all of those traffic incidents. You're passing through all those API calls. And when you lose one single API or transaction, that really means losing the trust with your customer and also your revenue. So the reliability and security are crucial. And it's hard to manage that. And finally, API is just not just growing the volume itself, but they're also more diverse than ever. So you have a multi-cloud environment, and I've talked to our customers, and many customers are saying, hey, we have multiple gateways. How do I manage all of them? And how do I have a visibility? How do I have some sort of make sense out of all this data coming in to make sure that we are secure? You have Kubernetes to microservices, plus there's a variety of protocols like REST APIs, GraphQL, and gRPC. And this diversity is really, it's not easy to manage all of them. So things that I've been saying to our customer is, we need to have a really good hygiene in creating and managing those APIs to support explosive growth that we're expecting, and it is happening. So if you don't know already, Apigee is a full lifecycle management platform to help you create, manage, and secure all your APIs for any use cases at any scales for every developers. So Gartner Magic Quadrant calls it as an industry leader in API management platform service, that space, in the last 8 years straight. And then Apigee is agile because anybody can quickly spin up your APIs and start working on your application. And even more so, and as we're going to demonstrate today, that Gemini Code Assist can help you to creating those APIs. And then we also have a flexibility to support multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments. So many customers, their strategy is not just one single cloud, not GCP, but multiple cloud, and we can support that. So that means your runtime could be staying at GCP, or it could be elsewhere, wherever you would like that to be. So our strategy today is GCP first, yeah, because we are Google, but it's not GCP only. Also, you can register all your APIs to API Hub so that you have a centralized universal catalog to organize and manage the full lifecycle of APIs. And as we are deeply integrated with the Google infrastructure and AI ecosystem, you can also get the reliability at any scale and easily integrate with all the Google Cloud services. And last but not least, we can provide risk assessment on misconfigured APIs and abuse detection from any attacks so that you can protect APIs. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Todd to talk more about things that we can help you with, and then we're going to straight to a demo.
Thanks, Sujin. Hello? Is it on? OK. Great. Hi. So my name's Todd. I work with Sujin. I'm a principal engineer in Google Cloud. And I work with a lot of the engineering teams, a lot of it on Apigee and application integration. Before Google, I spent a lot of time writing a lot of code as a platform engineer and building API systems and API gateways and dealing with legal and governance and analytics and monetization for APIs for 20-ish years. And so today I want to talk about the challenges that platform engineers have with managing APIs. So first of all, any company that has an API has an API program. It may not be a good API program, but you have an API program. And it can be a reactive. We only care about it when something goes horribly wrong or when there's a new regulation that comes out API program. Or it can be proactive with lots of good API hygiene, like Sujin was talking about. Typically, you have a platform engineering team that's at the center of all of the requirements from the different people involved in API management. So you have service developers who are incentivized to write new services and get new features out, right? And they want to go as fast as they can and get things out to customers. You then have the legal team who says, make sure we don't get sued. We have the privacy team, who says, make sure that we're compliant to all the regulations. We have the security team that says, make sure that there's not going to be attacks and we don't fall over. And then we have the humble platform engineer in the middle who has to support all of these things. People going very, 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 very fast. People who need to get new features out, and people who say, like, hey, don't let things go too fast. Don't let our customer data get out there. And so being a platform engineer is very difficult and requires completing a lot of tasks that have a lot of context. So some of that context is make sure the service developers can go as fast as they can without them having to learn about the privacy and regulatory requirements and without being able to mess up the privacy and security requirements for their customers and for whatever industries they're in. So we have this wheel sometimes where we talk about all the tasks that are available in API management, building APIs, designing APIs, testing APIs, documenting APIs, operating the APIs and the services behind them, making sure they're available, making sure they have low latency, making sure they're appropriately monitored, making sure that when there's an outage somewhere in the world, traffic fails over appropriately, ensuring data replicates appropriately. And then API governance and getting into things like who has access to the APIs, how do we monetize the APIs? What are insights we have on the APIs that will benefit our company or benefit our customers? Which customers are using the APIs? And all of these segments of the wheel have lots of individual tasks that have lots of individual stakeholders in them. And everybody is really focused on doing their job. And they want to do their job as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible without having to talk to 35 other people. Like a common API program that I've seen and that some customers have is creating an API and managing it as an 80-page document that requires coordinating with 53 different teams and getting all sorts of sign-off. So this is not something that's going to keep your business efficient. It's not something that's going to keep your business very safe and moving very quickly. So this is where we think generative AI can really help. We think it can help people do their jobs better. So we think that generative AI for all of these tasks can help on the spectrum of novice to expert, can help move people more towards the right by encoding contextual information from the other stakeholders into the tasks. So for example, helping the developer create a new API, helping them design a new API, but having the privacy and security policies in it by default. So letting the security team set what sorts of policies, what sort of data extradition is allowed, what sort of annotations and policies are allowed with specific APIs in the tools that help their developers quickly create APIs. So it's not just about speeding up developers. It's not just about speeding up legal. It's not just about speeding up compliance. It's about helping everyone do their job more efficiently. And everyone in their job has different tools that they use. So we're going to do some demos. And I'm extremely nervous because the Ethernet is not working. And so I'm praying to the Wi-Fi gods. So these demos are going to be a combination of extremely live demos against production, and then some things that we have some more backups of. So I'm going to hope that it works. If not, I have recordings, and I'll be dead inside. And there's a step there. So we're going to talk about 5 scenarios with a fictional company going through a API lifecycle management journey. Keep in mind, there's well more than 5. There's really, in reality, there's hundreds. So we're going to talk through designing an API, collaborating on that API design with different stakeholders, managing the API after it's been developed in terms of applying policies to it, defending the API or protecting it when something bad happens, when the API is attacked, because that happens, especially now that AI can read API specs, create code that calls APIs. As Sujin was saying, you'll see this huge inflection in both API creation and API consumption. And then we're going to talk about integrating the API with other business processes. So you have a lot of folks in the organization who want to use APIs, but they're not necessarily professional developers. OK. So let's start with a fictional company heavily inspired by our location here in Las Vegas. They're called Symbol Entertainment. They have hotels and casinos and theme parks and restaurants and all sorts of really neat things. Internally, they're a big company. They have lots of divisions. They have a large IT department. They have lots of software engineers. They have lots of legal and regulatory compliance issues. They have data residency requirements. Their APIs are attacked. Various different stakeholders that need to do different things. Segal is an Apigee customer, hooray! So they use Apigee to manage their APIs, to publish their APIs to portals that are Segal branded, to help application developers create applications that use the Segal APIs. They have various teams of engineers building different services. So the teams who are working on hotel booking are very different than the teams that are working on tuning the slot machines to pay out more or less. I don't know how many of you have had the joy this trip. I'm kind of happy it's ending today. But they have different developers who all want to move quickly at different times. And then they have these centralized platform teams that wants to make sure that everybody's doing their job quickly and not breaking each other, not creating new APIs that have massive new risks for the company, but also not blocking the company from releasing new innovations. Okay, and so for that, they use Apigee. Apigee has a catalog of APIs in it, built into a product called API Hub, which is kind of the central repository where all the APIs live across all the different business units. It's something that we're releasing to preview, I believe, this month. So we're about to get into the demos. Every demo that we show is something that's going to be available in preview this quarter. Okay. So our first scenario here, we have Hana. Hana is a service developer. And Segal has decided they want to create a loyalty rewards program API. Segal wants to reward customers and retain customers for spending money in Segal casinos and theme parks and restaurants and slot machines. And so Hana is a backend developer. She knows how she wants the API to work. She knows where she wants the data to be stored, what database. Creating an API specification is a pretty high toil task, but it's extremely, extremely important, especially when building out the Segal rewards functionality in the various apps. They have an Android app, and an iPhone app, and a web app, and all sorts of things. And the problem for Hana actually is more than designing a specification. She wants to design a high-quality specification. So part of it is, yeah, it needs to be syntactically correct. It needs to pass all the various parsers. In this case, they require OpenAPI specification, which is a YAML file or a JSON file with all sorts of fields. It also needs to be consistent with the rest of Segal. It needs to meet Segal's API style guide. It needs to meet their security requirements. It needs to have appropriate metadata about who is the owner of this API, how do you authorize this API, et cetera. And it needs to show up in the API catalog. So we're going to get into a demo here for how Hana can get from an idea or her business requirements into a high-quality API specification in a few seconds. So let's go ahead and switch over to the demo laptop. I forget if there's a special code word, fireworks or cotton candy. Yep, OK. There we go. So now we're on laptop, and the Wi-Fi says it's working. Now we pray. OK. So Hana is a service developer. She writes code. She's in VS Code. She's not in a special web editor. She's not in a different app. She's in her native tool environment. And in this case, it's an IDE. It's VS Code. And in VS Code, there's Google Cloud Code, which has all sorts of nice panels for managing Kubernetes and interacting with her Kubernetes resources, Secret Manager, Compute Engine, and then there's an Apigee panel. And so, like I said previously, Segal uses Apigee and API Hub. All of their different business units publish their APIs into the centralized catalog. And Hana can look at things in there. And we'll click on this. The Wi-Fi is slightly slow. And we get this nice Swagger renderer. And Hana can look at, OK, there's terms of service and a Segal website. And there's casinos and slot machine objects. And slot machine has these fields associated. OK, great. Hana still doesn't necessarily know what to do for her scenario, for how to create a specification. So let's go ahead and close that, and we're going to press the Gemini button. So Gemini Code Assist is going to help Hana not just write an OpenAPI specification, but write an OpenAPI specification that is right for Segal and right for her task. OK. So let's go ahead and close this out. OK. So she gets this nice box for natural language. Empty pages, empty boxes are sometimes concerning to deal with. So we have some prompts for her that show examples of how to write an API description. I want with a user story as a prospective student, I want to browse yoga classes or describe an API for blog post content management. This sort of approach looks like it works well for HANA. So I'm going to pretend I'm HANA here, and I'm going to copy this prompt that I saved. And I'm going to paste it into here. And I'm going to say, OK, we're going to create a loyalty rewards API. We're hitting production now. Wi-Fi, come on. As a systems integrator, I need to reward a customer with points as they spend money. As a customer service agent, I need to check a customer's point balance. I need to credit a customer with points when they encounter a problem. As a customer, I want to view my point balance, see a list of prizes, and see how to ship them to my house. So let's see what Gemini came up with. So first of all, Gemini generated an open API specification. This is based on Gemini Code Assist, which is based on Google Core LLM's Vertex AI technology that has also been fine-tuned and trained and augmented with Google Cloud documentation and Google Cloud code references. And it says that in this API spec, we've actually made 10 modifications that are specific to symbol. So if you notice in the API here, there are terms of service, there's website, so HANA didn't have to specify any of these things. Here's customer object with points. Here's prizes, like let's take a look at, let's actually go down and see what a prize looks like. So HANA didn't describe prizes. There's a concept of inventory, a concept of point value, a name, a price ID. This is pretty good. We can look at the code here, and we can notice this kind of long description. We can change it. We can change the name if we want. Loyalty API reward for me, because it's a very live demo. Another thing I'll just highlight at the bottom is there are security schemas in here. So API key authentication and payment authentication are already in here. And these are based on information that Gemini has retrieved from the rest of the API catalog. So this highly relevant contextual information. So let's go ahead and save this and publish it up to API Hub. We'll call it the Loyalty Rewards API for me. We're creating a new version of this, and this is uploaded to API Hub. So this helps her create this specification, and that's one small part of the journey. Let's go back to the slides for a second, and let's talk about the next problem that HANA has. So click. Great. So HANA has this specification. Like, does it do what symbol needs it to do? Right? Can the mobile applications integrate in the loyalty rewards API appropriately? Right? So for that, HANA is going to work with a tool who's a mobile developer at Symbol. He's going to write a prototype of the loyalty rewards experience into the application, and he wants to use the specification. HANA doesn't want to create the database schema, doesn't want to write the service before she knows the API is the right one. So HANA and a tool are now going to collaborate on the API specification by providing a mock that HANA can iterate on, and then also that a tool can use to build the mobile application. So I see that I'm using a lot of time, so I'm going to go more quickly, and we're going to go to the next demo really quickly. Now that we have this specification, I want to highlight that servers, we provided a localhost server called Cloud Code that HANA can use already to retrieve mock data and see if the API is kind of structured the way she wants. Also, for sharing with a tool, she can press this button, Deploy Mock Server. We'll give it a name. We'll call it Loyalty Mock. And we'll go ahead and start deploying this to Cloud Run. So this may take up to a minute. So I'm going to show first, this is running on a service that's just running on my local host. Get customers, we're going to have this big try it out button. It doesn't take any parameters. Execute, and so you can see curl is creating a GET request to localhost calling customers with accept.json. It gets data that's structured this way. So HANA thinks it's OK. We're also deploying this mock server to Cloud Run so that a tool can build a prototype of the mobile application against it and actually call the API live and get the exact same data back. So as long as this takes just a few more seconds, and this is something that typically would be a lot of work. So typically, we'd have to go and we'd have to create a container, and we'd have to create an image and upload it to an artifact registry and deploy it either to a cluster somewhere or to Cloud Run or Cloud Functions. We'd have to create load balancing rules. create a URL for it, make sure certificates are up to date, et cetera, et cetera. So it's taking a minute, but that's what all of the steps are happening. This could take up to it. And we'll see when it's done. This box here, oh, deploying, done. OK, yeah, now I have a new server that I can use, loyaltymock random name.run.app. And we'll call this customer API again. We'll call execute. And you can see curl is hitting this nice new endpoint, getting the same type of information back. So now anyone else in Symbol, without HANA actually having to create a backend and actually without having to write the real service, she can share the interface with people building the application. OK, so let's switch back to the slides. OK, and then one last thing. So now we're going to talk about where HANA is going to complete her job. So HANA, now the API specification she worked on with the tool does what she wants it to do. Gemini helped her do that. Gemini Code Assist also helped her publish a mock. She's now implemented using normal Gemini Code Assist to write the service code and to deploy the service code. She's going to deploy this to Apigee as an API proxy. Then after that, someone completely different on the team, who in this case is Ruby, and Sujin will talk through Ruby's journey in a minute, is going to add policies and is going to help govern the API without involving HANA at all. OK, so let's go back to the demo one last time, and then I'm going to hand it to Sujin and hope I didn't eat all of the time for the session. So then the last thing we're going to do here, if you notice, there's one other button, which says Create API Proxy Bundle. So this is something where I'm going to call it Loyalty Proxy. OK, and so now HANA had set up for her all the routing rules that help get the requests to her specific API that use her API specification, et cetera. And from HANA's point of view, she's done. She doesn't know anything about policies. She doesn't know about what sort of authentication should be used. That's not her job. That's somebody else's job. It might be her job, and if it is, then she would be the person doing the next step of this as well. But in this company, there's all sorts of service developers. The authentication requirements change all the time. Sometimes they add new types of authentication. HANA's not involved at all. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sujin. And Sujin's going to walk through how other people at Symbol can interact with this.
Thanks, Todd. All right. OK, so what just happened? So let's just kind of recap what Todd showed. So, and this is really how Gemini can help you creating and managing APIs. So HANA is a service developer, remember that, and she was able to create a quality API based on natural language prompt, and you saw that. And then this new API, the impressive thing about this new API is we call it an enterprise context. So what does that mean? It means that she was able to create a quality API that follows the standard of the Symbol company's standard. So a Symbol company has their own style rules, and they have their security postures. You saw the authentication authorization. There was, it was guideline by Symbol. So it kind of Gemini understand your own API standard, and then it knew how to create the new APIs. Then HANA created a local mock server to test the new API, and then she was also able to create a remote mock server that is running on Cloud Run. And then she was able to collaborate with her colleague, a tool, so they can work together to develop the mobile app. And then HANA, last thing that Todd showed was that HANA created the API for her APIs, the proxy for APIs. So now, throughout this demo, we saw that how Gemini can really play the critical role here. And now let's think about Ruby. So now Ruby is a platform team. And she sees that usage of this proxy is overwhelming the infrastructure. So Ruby decides to add a spike arrest policy to the proxy that she just developed to prevent any abuse. So let's actually go to, so now what Ruby's going to see is the same loyalty program proxy in the Cloud console. And let's see what happened here. So as you can see, that she's not familiar with all this Apigee, And as you can see, there's a royalty program, and this is what she created in the VS Code, and now she can see that in the cloud console, and this is the Apigee Cloud Console. But she knows, she's not familiar with all this. So look at this policies, policy endpoint, and target endpoint, and resources. But she knows what she wants to do, and she wants to make sure that she wants to add a spike arrest policy so that user cannot exceed the limit based on the API key from the client. So there's a Gemini chat here that I'm going to click. OK, that is right there. The Gemini is the experimental AI. And now this is kind of introduction of Gemini. So now I'm going to say, questioning Gemini, please help me generate an, let's say, Apigee spike arrest policy that imposes a limit of 30 requests per minute based on the API key from the client. So right there. And let's see what happened. And then loading the Gemini. Wow, so look at this. There is a step-by-step information about what I need to do, and what Ruby should do. So in here, it says select spike arrest from the list of policies and copy the code. And what is impressive about here is that there is actually a snippet of code, and then it's asking me to copy this. And then I'm going to go ahead and close the Gemini chat box, and then drop it in here. And look at this. There is a spike arrest name. It is called API key-based spike arrest. And then it looks like this is how the Gemini was able to create and authoring the policy for me. So this looks great. So let's think about 6 months later, Ruby or maybe somebody else in our team says, oh, wow, look at this. What is this? Like, what's 30 p.m.? And when you see on the left side, there is a Gemini button here, and it explains the code. So I'm going to click that in here, and then see what happens. On the right side, it actually shows, yeah, 30 p.m. That means it's a maximum 30 requests can be made per minute. So it gives you information about what that is. So that's awesome to see that. So now let's come back to the slide. So now let's think about the next problem, the next challenge. So the next challenge is how to defend your APIs. So royalty program is now out. It's up and running. People are happy. They're signing up. And we see the really active traffic for the loyalty program. So it's successful. So, but then again, at the same time, the attackers are very opportunistic, right? Because they want to get the point. They want to get all those reward prizes. And maybe more deliberately, they're looking for customer information so that they can sell. Maybe there's people out there who wants to target the member with a high rewards point for the false advertisement scheme, or whatever that might be. So in this case, Natalie, she's a service operator in the security ops team. And then she wants to configure, she already knows the API security, and then she configured to get the email from her service dashboard. So let's see what happened here. So let's go to the demo. So luckily, oops, yep, there's a, let's go back. So luckily, the Apigee has a security protocol, advanced API security, that provides the abuse detection capability. So let's look at what she got. So from the email, there was a risk. And look at this. There's a risk level is high. There are 3 impacted proxies. And then it happened this morning at 4 a.m. And then it came from the US, Canada, and Japan. And that's what it shows. And then it looks like there's a rule detected, the account takeover. And then there's a 2,600 dominant rules events happening. So this looks really, really critical. Then I get to see this insight here, and that this is a Gemini symbol. I'm just going to click that. And wow, so what this gives me information about what had happened. So what it looks like, there's a denial of service attack originating from the US. And attacker is from API endpoint. This looks like attacking the rewards program. And attacker is using a high proportion of traffic from a single IP addresses. So it gives me suggestion about blocking the following IP addresses, and then configure the API to limit the number of requests, and also asking possibly configuring the web application firewall. So what else can I do here? So it gives me information about what are the questions that I can ask. So it's a contextual questions. So I'm going to click, how do I implement the web application firewall? So let me click that. And on the right side, you get to see step by step, once again, how I can create and configure the firewall, which is awesome. So now one thing that I'm going to ask is, what about my policy? How can I create the policies? So I'm going to ask some questions here as well. How can I apply security policy within my network setup? So voila, there's also a setup that you can configure. So Gemini Code Assist can really provide the clear recommendations and even the questions that you may not have asked, and now it's asking you to ask those questions so that Gemini can help you. So now, let's go to the next demo, and this is the last one that we're going to be showing. So now that you need to integrate with the new APIs with the other systems. So Symbol Entertainment Company has so many other systems out there, right? And then they want to reward those customers who is spending a lot of money on the company. So now Seth, he is working in IT, and then let's say he's working for customer happiness department at Symbol. And he needs to connect various systems, right? Hotel system, restaurant system, and then casino system for the new loyalty program. So for example, when hotel service generate a bill, then the bill event should trigger some sort of a payment system with the credit card information that they already have on file. And it should also trigger the loyalty program API so that customer can get the points and receive an email, let's say, about the rewards their balance. So now let's look at how we can do that. So let's go back to the demo. OK, so now, as you can see, the application integration is a product that we have. And for Seth, he's an IT person, but he's not really familiar with making a whole bunch of code and then having the integration happen between all the systems. So hopefully, you may know already that we have a product called Application Integration Product. And it helps you automate business processes without writing code based on building blocks like APIs and pre-built connectors for well-known systems and custom connectors for any kind of proprietary systems. So you can just simply drag and drop to all the components and develop your code. And this is really great for non-developers. So as you can see here, the custom connectors, and this is a loyalty program connectors that we created based on the loyalty program API that HANA created. And then I'm just going to go to integration. And this is a live demo, so I'm also praying that everything works fine. Not create integration. I'm going to just call it a reward. OK, I cannot spell today. Just rewards. I'm going to copy that here. And then I'm going to create. Okay, so on the right side, there's a blank sheet in here, and there is a magic button right there. So I'm going to look at that. And as you can see, there's a prompt template, just like what HANA saw. And then you can also click any of these. But I actually have a prompt that I prepare. So let's look at the prompt, and let's look at what Seth would like to do. So what we want to do is when creating an invoice event from the hotel service, extract the customer ID and total billing amount, and then credit the customer based on ID with 2 points for every dollar spent, calling the loyalty program API. And everything successful, then send the customer an email telling them about their new balance. And if it's failed, then push the failure information into the failure queue. OK, that's the prompt. And I'm going to click the generate. And let's see what happens here. This is going to take just for, OK, great. So now there is a processes that you can see that is available for me. And then it gives me an explanation about those flow. So triggering the behavior and all those testing. So it looks like it is doing what I asked to do. So now I'm going to confirm that and then make that as a center. So let's look at this. So there's an invoice event going on. And then there's extracting the data. And this is where data mapping will happen. So like that 2 to 1. So every dollar you spend, you get 2 points. So that is configured there. And then there's also a call loyalty program API. So now, remember this loyalty program API? That was a connector that I made. And then somehow Gemini understands that this is that right connector that it's supposed to connect. So it connects it. And then also on the left side, when I see that, and this is supposed to show, wow, the API. So now all the APIs that the HANA created, now it knows exactly which API that it's supposed to connect. So it's a post, it's not get or any other, APIs that is available. So it is great that you can see that. And when you see in here, it shows on the right side the loyalty program happened. If it's successful, then you're going to send an email. Okay, let's do that. And then here on the right side, in the loyalty program, that event fails, is not successful, then this will happen. The failure events happen. So as you can see, the Gemini understood the prompt and generate the workflow and suggested which API to use. And the stat didn't really have to know much about email system or failure event system. And without being the code expert, the stat was able to create this workflow and connect the systems. So now let's look at the slide. So let's summarize what we have sharing with you. So recapping all the 5 AI-assisted API automation that we just went through this session. So we generate API spec from the natural language with the enterprise context. And then we created a local mock server. And then also we created a remote mock server to collaborate with your system. And then we were able to create the API proxy. And then Gemini actually helped me author the proxy, the spike arrest policy. And then also, Gemini was able to share the insight about the security threat, what to do about reducing those response time, because I found out how I should be able to respond. And then Gemini was helpful to create a workflow through application integrations. So with that, call to action. So we have a demo going on downstairs. Go downstairs and check it out. And this is the QR code that you can scan and get on our Trusted Tester program that you can actually be hands-on and work on it. And then now the customer engagement, and this is early access that you can do. And our UX engineer has been asking me to make sure that we are sharing this, give you an opportunity to get the early access to your work and shape up the kind of a product direction that you can help us to get us the feedback so we can kind of shape our product direction. And then lastly, you can take a survey, especially if you are Apigee customer. It'd be great to get your feedback on that. So with that, thank you.